So we was talking about sports, right? And
Hmm.
something that I was going to add there. I know that sports obviously has a big market. One of the problems that I see is sports a few years ago got too political. I was literally
Yeah.
talking to my boss today, and I asked him, I was like, "Hey, would you like to check out my podcast?" And he's kind of like, "What's your episodes about?" And I was like, "Well, my first couple were about sports," and he just
Hmm.
was not interested at all.
Uh-huh.
And he wasn't interested at all, basically because of sports getting too political a few years ago, and he was specifically
Yeah.
aggravated with the fact that the military had to pay for advertisement, which you know um, I don't really even know how I really feel that about that. I mean, I get it, but the military doesn't really have like rights to privately owned business and
Yeah.
marketing.
I mean,
So
and the military, I mean, as bad as it is, it's kind of a business in its own right as well, you know.
yeah, yeah, and you could get into like a whole thing on the military industrial complex and like all this stuff. But I kind of feel like maybe the military should pay for some marketing if they're going to advertise.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, it's a I mean, we live in a capitalistic society too, you know. I mean, you're not going to have an election without like advertisements and stuff like that as well, you know. I mean, like you're not I in our society, I see it as being hard to get around that.
hmm
That doesn't make it right. I ain't saying it's right necessarily, but
yeah.
I imagine it'd be hard to get around that. I could be wrong about that too. I mean, I don't know.
It was a tough topic for me because I kind of got into the same view as he was. Is it was kind of where sports, particularly the NFL, kind of made me mad. There's that whole Kaepernick controversy, and I
Hmm.
think it ruined it for a lot of people. And you sort of see it more from the more right wing side of things, where they're just like, you know what, I'm not interested in this any longer.
I know
And
the shot, the COVID-19 vaccine was like super political thing in sports as well.
hmm yeah, yeah, it was, and there was like some players um, refusing, and they were basically wanting to kick them off teams. And
Hmm.
sports got way more political, and I kind of feel like they divided their possible audience in half. Um, I do think that sports has a big role in podcasting. Sports shows, sports talk shows. The Pat McAfee show is one of the most popular and successful shows of all time. And
Hmm.
you know, I don't want to sort of put myself in that box,
Hmm.
and sort of the reason why you're here. But I think that sports don't have to be political neither. I think that if you enjoyed sports, you can sit down and watch a football game and have fun doing it. And I think too many topics has gotten overly political.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's just it gets drawn into everything when it's the biggest thing, you know.
hmm I just don't want to think about a political opinion when I go and buy a pair of sneakers. You know,
Yeah.
I don't want to go and buy a pair of Nikes and be like, "Oh man, he's automatically this such and such supporter because he's wearing such and
Yeah.
such shoes."
Hmm.
I just want to wear something comfortable that's going to last. It just so happens to be that Nike is that for me at this
Yeah.
moment.
I think that's just a big part of like politics becoming a bigger thing over like say the last 8 to 10 years or whatever. Like I remember when politics was super boring and nobody cared about it.
hmm
You know, like you'd talk like vaguely about it to people and people would have no idea what you're talking about. And you just kind of leave it alone, be like, yeah, I'm good. Like nobody really knew or cared what was going on. But I think it's a beautiful thing that it's been talked about more. I mean, it definitely creates a level of grossness around it and everything, but with a lot more eyes on all that stuff, it does create a lot more accountability.
hmm Yeah,
And I'm not
and
in the circus, so, you know,
yeah,
it doesn't bother me.
think that it causes more accountability for sure. But I'm kind of like with you. I kind of like when you had elections take place and you had a person win. Let's just say that Bill Clinton was versing whoever it was. I can't remember who it was, but it's just like,
Like
Bill
it was
Clinton won.
HW, wasn't it? Or
Was it?
is it which one? Which one was the? Which one's the old man? I get them mixed up. I'm dyslexic. HW and GW. HW was the old man, right?
I thought they
No,
was
no,
both in
GW.
Georgia.
GW.
Yeah,
G. Well, I mean, there was like one's HW Bush and then one's GW Bush or something like that.
yeah, yeah,
Well, it's whoever. If I'm not mistaken, I could be completely wrong, but I think it was the older guy. I think he
yeah.
really hated Clinton because he didn't get his second term in.
hmm Let's see who it
Clinton got.
was. You're probably right. Incumbent President Bill Clinton and his running mate Al Gore were reelected to a second and final term, defeating Bob Dole. Okay, so basically, and that's more to the point. That kind of helps make the point that I was trying to get at. And basically, it's like this: Bill Clinton wins against whoever Bob Dole was,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. That's the end of it. He just won. And no, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't like this whole thing afterwards. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so then the
It
next
was
person,
HW in '92 and Bob Dole in '96.
right? And then I guess it would have been Clinton ended up getting impeached, but he actually still finished his term in office.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So, but like I said, I mean, I had no clue who Bob Dole was. I've probably heard the name, but I had no clue who that guy was. You know.
Same.
But the thing is like when Trump wins or loses, whoever he's going against, that name is synonymous. Everybody in the country knows.
Yeah, but it's also really fresh though too.
That's very fair. That's very fair. I mean, 1996, the internet wasn't around, so information. I guess you're right. There's like a whole informational uh logistics thing that we're not taking into account.
Yeah, and also I think our minds are so quickly just moving to the next thing.
hmm
Like with the Mangione thing, like there's all kinds of buzz around that guy and everything, and it probably won't disappear because the guy has like a cult following and stuff like that. But say he has a trial, that stuff's usually dragged out. He has a trial a year from now. Are people even going to be paying attention a year from now? Probably, because I think he has a big trial, but he's also a pretty niche situation.
Are you talking about the Luigi like assassination thing?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm
I'm
talking about,
literally like not familiar with it at all. I just
and
heard
I'm
that
talking
there's
about like the shortness of people's attention spans.
right, right. Yeah.
To bring it full circle and stuff like that. Like there's, big people say that there'll be huge protests, and I kind of think there may very well be, and everything like that. But people just have this cyclical mind. They just move from one thing to the next.
Yeah. I'll tell you something really interesting. So I'm not really familiar with the Luigi thing. I know that he basically assassinated some healthcare CEO or something. That's
Hmm.
basically my knowledge. But what I did find interesting, and I did witness this, was in some of the more right wing social media groups, they were applauding this guy basically, and then it gets sort of role reversed where once they found out, hey, the left is like, sort of like applauding this assassination attempt, then the right wing guys were like,
Hmm.
yep, I don't want nothing to do with that, like the left can have him. And it was
That's
like,
crazy, man.
and I just thought to myself at the time, it's like, I'm not saying that I agree with it or at all,
Hmm.
assassinating someone, but what I'm saying
Oh,
is,
absolutely.
it's like y'all can't even get along on something that you agree with, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So
To
I guess
me, man, I mean, they seem like they go a lot of times where they're like, most people are saying that, they don't agree with murder, but what did you expect?
yeah. Well, I mean, there's definitely some huge problems with the healthcare system in America. I know
Hmm.
that firsthand, and as well as every other American. It's also one of those things to where it's like this CEO. What power did he actually have to change what's essentially a system problem? You know.
Well, as a CEO, you're the director of the company. You direct
Mhm.
you move the company forward. You have the fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders. Myself personally, I don't trust I don't trust insurance companies, but
Mm-hmm.
especially when, I really, we used to have these Geico people come in and try to sell us insurance and stuff. And,
Mm-hmm.
the only thing I would ever buy is life insurance and stuff like that. But man, I would just absolutely grill these people with questions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, I don't trust, you're sitting there trying to sell me a product, but I know when it comes time for me to collect my end of the product, you're going to look for every possible reason to not meet the deal. You're going to find some way that you can think that I broke the contract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's what it always seems to work out to. And I seen something, I have no idea how true it is, take it with a grain of salt, that supposedly there was a worker from United Healthcare
Mm-hmm.
that said that, like they would have a lot of water cooler talk amongst the office, amongst the employees and stuff like that, where they would talk about, they were supposed to deny a certain percentage of claims. And it's basically reminds me of like a cop having a quota or something like that. If you're not you're not out to accept and deny claims based on their actual validity. You're out to, you might push one through for one reason, but then try everything you can to get rid of one because, the month's about to end and your numbers aren't looking so good. It reminds me of like sales jobs,
Mm-hmm.
trying to sell crazy bread. You can't make people buy the crazy bread. They either want it or they don't.
Yeah. And just to talk about the profit and nonprofit sort of healthcare, I know a small amount, but I get to work with a lot of healthcare professionals in my
Mm-hmm.
job. And recently, the healthcare in our area sort of went from for profit to nonprofit. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that comes, with a lot of changes in accounting. And one of the biggest things that sort of some of the business administrators have told me about is that you have a lot of people who, when they were for profit, they could deny people who couldn't pay for the health care. But now that they're nonprofit, they're forced to pretty much take on every patient and
Mm-hmm.
perform that service, and then they would just get, added into the count. So in other words, you break your leg, you get it fixed, you don't have health insurance, or your health insurance doesn't cover it, or whatever, your name is going down in their system, and you're going to have a balance, and then it's up
Yeah.
to that healthcare, to sort of come after assets or whatever. So it's a
Yeah.
lot of accounting differences, and I agree that the healthcare system needs totally revamped. I don't know what uh, what the CEO's story was. He might have been the most wonderful guy in the world. He might have been the most terrible
Yeah, I don't
crooked
know much about
capitalist.
him
Yeah, I just wonder like
himself
how much
personally.
power he had to change. Because even the CEOs, they have to answer to a board of directors. And I'm not taking up for this guy. I'm just saying that there's a lot that goes into this, and he
Oh, yeah.
might have been pretty much this Luigi guy's martyr, I guess, or however you want to put it.
Hmm.
But I don't think that he would have had the ability to change things um, to the extent that they need it changed. You know,
Yeah.
but
You
I'm
know,
not. I'm not a healthcare, professional, advisor or
yeah.
anything like that. So,
Well, you know where my position's always been, man, that people like to blame the healthcare people, and I'm sure their hands aren't clean. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure their
mm,
hands aren't clean. I've heard people like to blame poor people that the prices are so high because only a small portion of people actually pay their bill.
mm-hmm,
And then you have, rich people are able to pay it. And then poor people on, I guess, either Medicare or Medicaid, I can't remember which one it is, are able to pay it because they have that insurance or whatever. You have the middle class that kind of gets screwed in a lot of ways. But my
mm-hmm,
personal opinion, I have no idea. I'm obviously not, neither, we're just, no sense in, obviously we're not experts, but I think the prices of things are what's ridiculous. I mean, if you look at medical things that are generally covered under, healthcare and stuff like that, they're astronomical. I mean,
Hmm.
astronomical. But you take something like glasses where you have to have a special insurance for it, you can afford glasses. If you
Hmm.
don't have any insurance or anything like that, you can afford to go have an appointment. You can afford to buy the glasses. Now, I ain't saying they're cheap necessarily, but it's not like if if glasses and stuff like that was all covered under the same umbrella, I wouldn't be surprised the least bit if a pair of glasses wasn't $2,000-3,000 then.
Hmm.
You know, dental works the same exact way. They've found a way to create a system to where I feel like they're milking the taxpayers really because they don't care if me and you can pay it.
Hmm.
Because if we can get 10% of the people to make these claims and then they pay it, they'll cover everything.
Hmm. Yeah. And I can definitely sympathize with the cost of healthcare. I have a wife, I have two kids, it's a family of four, and my income is roughly $60,000, and
Mm-hmm.
my deductible is roughly $20,000.
Mm-hmm. I believe it.
That's a lot of money. By the time
And
the
that only
government
that
comes up with 25% of my check, then I got a $20,000 deductible. That's a lot of money. That
that
if something
deductible is
happens,
only
I go, you know,
over the course of a year as well.
yeah. That's
You
20
know,
grand that I have to think about in my head, like that at any given moment that I've got to come up with.
yeah,
And
you cover the first 20 and they'll cover the rest. That is insane.
yeah, so it's like
That's an
one of my
insanely
kids,
deductible.
if one of my kids break a leg, or if my wife gets sick, or if I get sick, that's $20,000 on top of
Yeah.
what you pay, monthly, which is, roughly $200 to $300. So I can I can empathize with the healthcare cost probably more so than anybody. I've been
Oh,
affected by it
absolutely.
tremendously in my life as a middle class American. But at the same time, I also work with a lot of healthcare professionals, and it's hard for
Mm-hmm.
me to look at, a nurse, that I work with and say, this is your fault, you know.
Well, it's not her fault. He's a part of a system.
Yeah. And that's why I say, like, I think the system is really at fault, and this
Yeah, I agree with
CEO
you.
is probably, but there is a lot of corrupt and bad actors.
Oh yeah.
This reminds me
I
of a
mean,
quote, Justin. I want to share it. Get your thoughts on it.
yeah.
Not the quote I was going. I told you I was giving you before the episode. This is a new one, and it's going to be really interesting. Are you ready for
Mm-hmm.
it?
Yep.
No snowflake in an avalanche thinks it's at fault.
Yeah. That makes me think of mob mentality.
Yeah, but how do you feel about that in regards to the healthcare industry?
Well, I mean, everybody's just a cog in the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a mob mentality. You take the whole healthcare system,
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to be able to change anything. You can't. It's as one person, it's hard to change a whole system.
Mm-hmm.
You and there's no reason for them to feel guilty about it
Mm-hmm.
because they got to be there to do this job, or else if you don't have them there at all, expensive or cheap, you're definitely screwed then.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, obviously, hats off to them for what they do. It's not their fault, but that doesn't mean that it's a fair and just system.
Oh no, absolutely not. And just to be even more dissenting and to muddy the waters even more, not that we haven't muddied them enough already. Um, I remember this particular time where, unfortunately, my wife and I were very young in our relationship, and she had a miscarriage,
Mm-hmm.
and we were talking to a doctor, one of our local doctors, And I look at the doctor and I say, I was pretty upset at the time. I say, hey, listen, like, did she have a miscarriage? Like, is there any chance of saving this baby and everything? And this doctor looks at us, and I kid you not, he looks at us and says, it's not called a miscarriage. It's called a spontaneous abortion. That is 100% a true story.
Mm-hmm.
And is that guy ethical, or is he, he was pretty much arguing terminology.
Mm-hmm.
Someone, one of the roughest times of their life up until that time.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, I would call him part of the problem. It's
Yeah.
especially then I would have, but the system is broken. It's broken for the middle class, the lower class. Somewhat take advantage of it sometimes. You
But
see
why
these
wouldn't you?
people, yeah, and I mean you see people 400 pounds go in there and do three doctor's appointments because their sugar's high, and it's like you know. Um, and then the middle class end up paying for it. The high class, I'm not there yet, so I don't really know how they're looking at it. But it seems like
Mm-hmm.
you don't have a lot of celebrities getting cancer. They're eating healthier. They have, they're getting more nutritionist advice, throughout the course of their lives. And but I do know that the system's broken and
Yeah.
things need to change. Hopefully, JFK
Oh yeah.
Jr. helps matters with changing some of the food industry. We can get a little healthier, and maybe somewhere down the line that lowers the cost of our of our health care. You can only
Yeah.
hope.
Hopefully, we'll see, man.
Yeah.
I hope so. I actually wrote a letter to the president.
Hmm.
Silly enough, I can't remember if I ever told you about that or not, but I had that laparoscopic appendectomy, which is the minimally invasive, take your appendix out.
Hmm. I know
I
we've
think this
talked about
was,
this several times, but why don't you share that story and sort of what the cost of that was, if you can remember, to the best that you can.
I kind of vaguely can.
Hmm.
Um, so I think this was maybe 2017. So this, 7 years ago or whatever. But I write a letter. Well, I go in, I have this laparoscopic appendectomy. I get my bill. I don't want to be a part of the problem. I want to pay it. I have health insurance, everything like that. I
Just
get
one
my bill and
second there.
everything.
So a
What's that?
laparoscopic appendectomy, that's basically like you was getting your appendix taken out, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. I was just making sure
Yeah.
I knew basically what we were talking about.
Yeah. So, I go and I get my appendix taken out and everything like that. In total, I was in the hospital for 19 hours from the time I checked in to the time I checked out and left.
Hmm.
All right. So I got my bill after insurance and everything like that was $30,000. And another crazy thing about it too is you don't just get one bill, you get like 10 bills from each different department because it's all compartmentalized and everything.
Hmm.
But everything was about $30,000. I remember
Hmm.
I sat down and I wrote a letter to the president about how broken I thought that system was. Obviously I got back some generic answer. I'm sure he never seen it. I never expected him to see it either. But I think I had to work at the time. I wasn't making very much money or anything like that. If I'm not mistaken, I had to work because I called the paper that I sent him 451 to 1.
Hmm.
And for every hour I spent in the hospital, I would have to work 451 hours before taxes to pay for that.
And you sort of wonder, like, how was the common person supposed to even begin to pay for that? The healthcare system
Oh,
back
yeah.
in the day, obviously, people were dying at 11 and 12 years old from the flu. I understand things have
Mm-hmm.
improved a great deal, but back in the day, you would see people call a doctor and he would come live with you
Mm-hmm.
until you either died or you were fixed. And things have changed a lot, but I mean, how many hours did you say? 400 and
451 hours at my job. So you got to think that's 10, 10, 12 paychecks,
Mm-hmm.
24 weeks of working, I think, to pay for
Mm-hmm.
one. No,
Mm-hmm.
no, no. Six paychecks.
Mm-hmm.
Because you work, 80 hours a paycheck.
Right. And how old were you when this happened?
Ah, like 26 maybe.
So you're 26 years old, and you're
No,
strapped.
25. I think I'm 25.
Okay, you're in your mid 20s, and you're pretty much strapped with $30,000 of medical debt.
Mm-hmm.
You could have went to college almost for that, and and
Oh yeah.
and got a degree uh, for that same price, but you're strapped with medical debt for something that if you wouldn't have had it fixed, you have an appendix rupture, you can die from that, right? Like
Oh,
that's
absolutely. I mean, hats off to them for saving my life. I mean, I'm eternally grateful to them for doing it. I
you'll
just,
be internally servitude to pay it off too.
absolutely,
Something
obviously I
has
got the
got
money.
to
I could pay.
change with it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I could pay for something like that right now. But the thing about it, though, when you really sit down and think about it, they don't care if I can pay for it or not, because there's going to be three other people come in there with Medicaid, and
Hmm.
theirs will automatically get paid for. They could probably do five of them surgeries for the
Hmm.
cost of every one.
Right. Yeah. Well, obviously, I've got a pretty big story on this and the cost of things, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid I don't have the time to really tell the full story, but I will tell just part of it as far as ridiculous prices. So, obviously, as you well know, my wife was diagnosed with a rare type of breast cancer at 29 years old. Let me fast forward to how this changes for money. So, at the time, I had no health insurance at all. I wasn't thinking
Mm-hmm.
about health insurance because I'm I'm pretty healthy. I'm 30 years old at the time. My wife was 29, and basically we go through and we get put on state insurance, but at the time we were waiting on the drugs to get approved. And I would say at that time, I probably had 20 to 30,000 in savings and cash. Very
Mm-hmm.
fortunate to have it. But basically, I'm freaking out. I'm asking like, why are we not getting these drugs approved? My wife, we have this tumor. It's growing exponentially. Like we need to get some help here. And I will never forget this as long as I live. I call I call the chemo center, the cancer center, and I ask them. I said, "How much is these drugs? Let me pay for it." And the insurance can pick up the second or third dose, but we need to get her help now. Today, tomorrow. And the lady on the other line, she told me. She said, um, "It's kind of tough to talk about," but she told me. She said that Randy, you can't afford this. And I was like, speak for yourself. It's kind of offensive, right? Someone tells you, like, you
Mm-hmm.
can't afford this. And she was right. So they sent me over to accounting or billing or whatever it's called. And I asked them, I was like, well, how much is this drug? So they're like, okay, well, she needs 5 chemo drugs. And so I'm talking to them. I'm like, how much is this or whatever? It was $30,000 and it
Oh
needed
yeah.
done once a week. That's not for any of the appointments. That's just for the drugs alone.
Oh yeah.
Nothing else. That's none of the blood work that has to happen before every single injection. It was $30,000. She had to have that done once a week for 6 months. I mean, there's no possible way that anyone could pay for that. I mean, you could have saved your entire life savings and never come close to paying for that.
Oh yeah.
Not close, not the doctor's visits, not the
Oh,
surgeries, not the
absolutely.
chemo. That's just $30,000 a week. And um, at that moment, um, at that moment, I just started praying about it, like God, like this is in your hands. Like I can't pay for this. I don't know what's going to happen with my wife, but this is in your hands. I have no clue what's going to happen here. That was on Monday. Tuesday, the lady called me. She said the drugs were somehow approved. We don't really know how, and my wife was getting chemo that Thursday the same week, and it's totally it's an insane system that we have,
Oh, absolutely.
and it needs change bad. I really didn't think this was what we were going to talk about today, man. I had on my computer this Denzel Washington quote,
Oh
and
yeah.
but
No, you're good. But hey, I wanted to bring this what we're talking to right now back to the Luigi Mangione, the CEO killing and
mhm,
everything.
yeah,
So did you see where he had words written on the shell casings of the bullets?
I didn't. I
So
literally just saw like the picture of the guy who I saw the picture of the two individuals, the guy who killed him, and then the guy himself, and that's literally it. Like I don't
so
know.
this is now obviously I don't know everything about this or anything, but this speaks to what I'm talking about earlier about like the water cooler talk about having quotas and trying to deny people and stuff like that. Like, and a CEO being the leader of a company and everything like that. There's this book that was written. So what was inscribed on the shell casings was delay, deny, defend, or
Delay, deny, defend.
deny, defend, depose. I'm not 100% sure exactly what it was. It's
Hmm.
something along those lines though.
Hmm.
And basically what it was, it takes back it goes back to this book that was written,
Hmm.
and it argues over how the industry prioritizes profits over policyholders. They think that if I can come up with a reason to deny your claim, to make you to have to go back and get another appointment,
Hmm.
to say you were on a certain medication and that gets red flagged, so you have to go and get this special appointment and then get a special document and everything like that, and say you're someone suffering from cancer. I actually know this is actually a situation of someone that I know,
Hmm.
that are going through that very same thing. And then how this whole thing works supposedly is, they're thinking in the back of their head, if I do this to 1,000 people, then maybe 50 or 100 of them will die before it comes back around. And then look at how much money I just saved.
Right.
When you turn people into a number. I love capitalism. I think it's the best system. Until it's proven wrong, I can't say that it's not the best system. I don't know that it's the best system in every situation.
Hmm.
But it's in my eyes, it's the best situation. It's the best system. But when it comes to healthcare, I'm not convinced that it's the best system.
I really like what you just said right there. Just a couple sentences ago, you said that capitalism is the best system, but it may not be the best system in every situation. I like
Mm-hmm.
that. Obviously, I'm a capitalist. Um, I do not believe in socialism or communism, pretty much at
I
all.
don't either,
But
because
it's
it
really,
ultimately
but it's
fails
really hard
eventually.
to defend the fact that for-profit healthcare is, I guess, the best argument for this is that we're not we don't have a right to somebody else's services that they provide. I don't have a right
Mm-hmm.
just because I have a broken leg. You can make all the morality arguments you want. I mean, is it
Mm-hmm.
moral if I'm a doctor to not treat a guy with a broken leg? Absolutely, it's not moral at all. But does that guy have a right to my labor? And the answer is no, because that's slavery. You know,
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's extremely complicated beyond measure. I'm not the right one to defend to defend for-profit or non-profit healthcare, but I will say this, and I think that you would agree. We've both been affected deeply by the broken United States healthcare system.
And I would say everybody either has or has someone really close to them who has.
Yeah.
Everybody, universally in the United States.
Right.
I would be amazed if there's somebody out there. Like, think about this. How hard do you think it's going to be to find a juror for this case?
Hmm.
So what's that jury selection process going to be like? Are you, I mean, how you going to ask someone like, do you have anything against the healthcare, the insurance companies? The only people who are probably going to say positive things about the insurance companies is people who work for
That's a really,
them.
really intelligent thought. I never even thought about that, but kudos to you, man. That is extremely intelligent.
I
The
mean, how do you
jury,
find jurors for this?
because on either
How,
side it'd be really tough. I'm actually on jury duty right now as we speak, which is kind of funny. But that is
I mean, if they
that is
work for the
that
health,
is an insane question because if you're looking for the jury, if you're the defendant and you're saying, "Hey, listen, we're trying to defend this guy," man, yeah, whichever way you go, you're basically finding a bias because the healthcare system's so broken that you're either, man, that is wild, you know.
yeah, you're either a proponent of the healthcare industry and you're a conflict of interest
Mm-hmm.
and biased,
Mm-hmm.
or you've been affected by it because everybody is either, like I said, been affected by it or knows someone who has been affected by it. And yet again, you're biased or a conflict of interest.
Mm. That's wild. I never thought about that before at all. I really haven't.
I'm sure I'm not the first person to think of it.
Well, you beat me to it, but it is wild because obviously this guy's going to go to prison, right? Probably.
I would say. I mean, he's probably going to get off. I feel like he might skirt a few charges, but they're going to pin something on him. I mean,
Yeah.
wanton endangerment. I mean, gunning a man down, fleeing. I mean, they're going to
Yeah.
get
He's done. I mean, he's going to
something.
go to jail probably for the rest of his life, or 90% of it, or whatever. I'm not a
I have
jury,
a
but
crazy. I have a feeling he's going to get 15 to 20.
I
It's
mean,
just a complete shot in the dark guess.
yeah, maybe so. What stage is he being charged in?
Mm.
What
New
state did
York,
this
I'm
happen?
assuming, because that's
It
where he
happened
done
in
it.
New York. Yeah.
Yes, I'm assuming he's being charged in New York. I
Well,
think he's like,
there's less uh life sentences in New York, I feel like.
mhm.
He wouldn't want to have done that in Texas or he'd have been done. Somebody would have made sure he was done. But
Oh yeah.
um it looks like we've been on here, man, 38 minutes, so I guess I'm gonna have to start thinking about cutting this short. This is a really, really deep third episode, and while you were sitting there talking, man, I was just thinking how appreciative I am of you letting me record you. I know that we tried to do a couple other episodes that kind of got screwed up. Um, this is going to be a very, very sharp turn from the sports. And
Mhm.
my hope is that that showcases that my goal for this show, one of the goals, is to talk about a variety of topics, whether or not.
And you also want a variety of people too.
Right. And I got some cool ones coming up. I've got a really cool one with my grandmother. She's 89. She'll be 90 in January. I got that one coming up. I'm probably going to let my son, who's about 12, and get into that interview and have them sort of talking back and forth. And
Mhm.
I think instead of this is a good part because it's more organic. Instead of going through the analytics of the show, we've had a lot of success over the last first two. Instead, I think I'll just ask everybody at the end of the show what their opinion is and if they have any advice for the podcast. So, starting with you, man, what advice do you got to give me for the show? And yeah,
I mean, I think just keep it organic, man. Talk to people, talk to everyday people. Get their opinions and stuff like that. Focus on your content first and foremost. And if someone's listening to this, it's primary audio. Obviously, you want to focus on bringing people the best quality audio that you can.
Mm-hmm.
Best
Um,
quality conversations. You want to keep it relevant.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the best I could think of.
Yeah. Do you think that podcasts will be around for a while, or do you think they'll sort of fizzle out like some forms of media have, or
I I think they'll definitely be around for a while. How long it'll be around, I honestly have no idea.
mm-hmm.
I could definitely see it being around for a really good while. Eventually, everything gets superseded by something.
Right.
I mean, you think about cell phones. Cell phones kind of came out of nowhere and they seem like they'll never go anywhere. But I guarantee, I don't know how long it'll be, but there'll be a day when people sit around and they look at each other and they'll be like, remember when we always used to have a phone on us? How weird was that?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's just, a pair of glasses that you wear or a wristband that gives you some augmented reality or something of that nature or whatever. I mean, I have no idea what it'll be,
Mm-hmm.
but everything is always superseded by something. I mean, nobody thought radio would go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's radio was around forever, and then you have the TV moves in. And you have these big TV news organizations and stuff of that nature. And I'd imagine that the majority of people thought that that was a pretty safe thing that was never going to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And something's always superseded by something else. You think about Blockbuster and stuff like that. I mean, you thought, well, shoot, people are always going to watch movies. This will always be around. This will always be a thing. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, people ain't gonna stop watching movies, are they?
Right.
No, they didn't, but they don't. It happens a completely different way over the internet. The internet's that big shakeup thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just like a phone was a huge shakeup thing.
Mm-hmm. I think that with AI pretty much making everything makes you question everything, from videos to um, my son was on VR earlier. He was on Google Earth on VR. It was insane. And
Mm-hmm.
some of the things that we see with AI, I feel like people want to get back to a simpler thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
just listening to a few people talk or interviewing interesting guests, I feel like that's going to be popular for a long time. Um, but at the same time, I also think that some of this insane, AI and some of the videos that are coming out are going to take a lot of market share. So, you know,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think that one thing that we never talk about that I've really been trying to tell some of the older people that I've talked to that I have planned future episodes with is that this will give some of the older people an opportunity to tell their story and talk about what they want to talk about, and the internet is forever, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like once that story's on there, it gives people an ability to sort of live forever, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word. But man, I really appreciate you. This one was a really fun one, and closing in on 45 minutes here. It's gonna be a little longer than the other ones. Uh, I appreciate you, man. I'm gonna end it here, and we'll be back at least within the next week or so.